Patricia was 29 years old when she believed she had discovered her soulmate, Keith. Their whirlwind romance blossomed quickly, leading to marriage within just a year. Keith, an accountant, was a tall man whose infectious laughter could light up any room. Meanwhile, Patricia worked in digital marketing, and her weekends were often spent pursuing her passion for painting. She had always been meticulous in planning, while Keith's spontaneous nature complemented her perfectly, or so it seemed. The day after their wedding, their living room was a beautiful mess, cluttered with gifts and cards that reflected the joy of their celebration. It was then that Keith's parents, Judy and Logan, decided to pay a visit. Patricia hadn't spent much time with them prior to the wedding, but they seemed pleasant enough at first. As they began to open the gifts, Patricia noticed that Judy and Logan were particularly interested in what they had received. When Judy picked up a crystal vase from Patricia's Aunt Kelly, she examined it closely, clearly captivated by its beauty. "Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it?" Patricia replied, trying to divert her attention away from the vase, which she had already envisioned a place for in their home. However, Judy soon set it aside with a nonchalant suggestion that it would look better in their house. Keith, distracted by some intricate kitchen tools from his cousin, didn't seem to notice Patricia's pleading look. He chuckled and told his mother, "Mom, that's our wedding gift," treating the matter lightly. "Oh, come on, it'll just gather dust here. We'll use it," Logan added, wrapping an arm around Judy and trying to keep the peace. Patricia insisted, "Actually, I was thinking it would look great in our foyer." Judy's expression shifted from pleasant to one of surprise and slight annoyance as she lectured Patricia. "You need to learn to share. We're family now, and families help each other out." Sensing the rising tension, Keith quickly tried to diffuse it. "Let's not worry about this now. We've got plenty of gifts." Patricia nodded, swallowing her frustration as they continued to claim items for themselves. She felt as though strangers were laying claim to parts of her new life, and Keith seemed oblivious to the discomfort it caused her. As their first wedding anniversary approached, the first year of marriage flew by in a blur. Patricia wanted to make it memorable and decided to reserve a table at Chat Louis, a quaint restaurant they both adored. She thought it would be thoughtful to invite Keith's parents, hoping to strengthen family bonds. When they arrived, Judy and Logan were already browsing the menus, and Judy remarked on the restaurant's fancy decor, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Keith squeezed Patricia's hand under the table, silently appreciating her effort. As the evening unfolded, she hoped that this dinner would bridge the gaps that had begun to form. Patricia ordered salmon, Keith's favorite, while Judy's eyes darted to the priciest items on the menu. "We'll have the lobster and the filet mignon," she announced, effortlessly choosing the most extravagant options. Logan chimed in with a cheeky wink to the waiter, suggesting they had a bottle of the finest wine. Patricia felt her smile tighten as she tried to maintain a light atmosphere. She remarked, "Quite the celebration, huh?" But Keith shrugged it off, stating, "It's a special night. Let's not worry about the cost." Throughout dinner, Judy and Logan seemed to relish every bite, oblivious to the hefty bill that awaited them. Patricia couldn't shake the feeling that their anniversary was being overshadowed by their lavish choices. When the check arrived, Patricia noticed Keith's surprise at the amount, but he quickly composed himself and handed over his card to the waiter. As they left, Judy linked her arm with Patricia's, her voice full of contentment. "Patricia, this was just lovely. We should do this again next year." Thanksgiving approached, bringing with it the onset of the holiday season. Keith and Patricia began decorating their home, blending autumn hues with early Christmas festivity to create a warm, inviting atmosphere. One evening, as they hung lights around the living room windows, Keith received a message and chuckled. "Oh, my parents are ahead of the game. They've already sent over their Christmas wish list." Curious, Patricia asked for details. Keith explained that they sent a wish list every year to make shopping easier. When he handed her the phone, Patricia was taken aback by the extensive list filled with high-end electronics, designer clothes, and luxury goods that seemed extravagant beyond belief. "They can't be serious," she said, scrolling through the items in disbelief. Keith shrugged and took the phone back, stating, "They like the good stuff. What can I say?" Patricia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. With Keith's birthday also approaching, she had been excited to give him a special watch he had been eyeing for months. Now, that excitement was dampened by the thought that their holiday gifts seemed more about fulfilling a lavish wish list than celebrating their love. When it came time for them to make their holiday wish list, she half-jokingly suggested, "Maybe we should just ask for charitable donations in our name." Keith laughed, but then remarked, "But seriously, you need a new laptop, right?" As the holidays approached, Patricia decided on a practical gift for Judy and Logan, a nice coffee maker, nothing too extravagant. In return, they gifted her a set of scented candles, which were lovely, but the stark difference in their gift exchange was evident. Keith, however, seemed pleased with the sophisticated drone they gifted him. The unspoken expectation was clear. They were to give generously and receive modestly. This imbalance didn't sit right with Patricia, but mentioning it only seemed to invite tension, so she remained silent, wrapping gifts and maintaining a cheerful demeanor throughout the holiday celebrations. One afternoon, while sitting at her desk absorbed in work, Patricia received a notification about her quarterly bonus, which turned out to be more generous than expected. Immediately, she thought of using it for something special for Keith and herself, a gesture to reignite the joy in their increasingly strained relationship. They had often dreamed of a romantic getaway to Venice, and it felt like the perfect opportunity to turn that dream into reality. That evening over dinner, Patricia revealed her surprise to Keith. His reaction was pure joy. His face lit up with an excitement she hadn't seen in a long time. "Venice? Really? That's amazing, babe," he exclaimed, rising to kiss her. The happiness of the moment was palpable, yet it was abruptly interrupted by his phone ringing. It was his mother. She overheard him excitedly share their plans, wishing he had kept it just between them a little longer. As he spoke, Patricia watched his enthusiasm fade into resignation. I know. You've always wanted to go," he said, his smile waning. When he ended the call, he turned to her, his expression somber. "They want to come with us," he said, seeking her approval. Patricia was stunned, her fork frozen midair. "To Venice? With us?" she managed to ask, trying to keep her voice steady. Keith nodded, explaining that they had never been and had always wanted to go. "Let's take them," he added, but Patricia felt the room grow claustrophobic. "It's supposed to be our trip, Keith. Ours," she emphasized, feeling a tightness in her chest. He was silent for a moment before saying, "I know, but they're getting older, and I feel bad. They've done so much for me." Patricia thought about the imbalanced gift exchanges, the overindulgent anniversary dinner, and countless other concessions they had made, but firmly stated, "But this is our time. We can plan a trip with them some other time. This bonus is for us." Keith sighed deeply, his frustration evident. "They won't understand that. You know how they are. And you know how hard I've worked for this," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I want us to enjoy this together, just us, like we planned." After a long pause, he relented, saying, "Okay, we'll tell them some other time might work better." But when it came time to have that conversation, Keith's resolve wavered. "Look, maybe we can all go together next year," he suggested. But Judy was quick to dismiss the idea over the speakerphone. "Why next year? We can afford it now," she countered, her tone thick with disappointment. Unable to hold back, Patricia finally spoke up. "Because this trip is for us, Judy. Keith and I. We need this time together." Her frustration was evident. There was a pause before Judy retorted sharply, "Well, that's very selfish of you, Patricia. Very selfish indeed." After the call, the atmosphere at home grew tense. Keith was visibly conflicted, but Patricia stood firm. This trip to Venice was meant to be a dream for them, and she wasn't willing to let it be compromised. In the days that followed, Keith seemed like a shadow of his former self, leaving early for work and returning late. Their interactions dwindled to the bare minimum. When she'd say, dinners in the oven, he would reply with a hollow thanks. Patricia missed him, missed the connection they once had. She yearned for the days when they would sit together on the couch, dreaming and laughing effortlessly. Now, it felt like there was an invisible wall between them, a barrier of thick glass. She could see him, but couldn't truly reach him. One particularly difficult evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, the only sound was the clinking of Keith's fork against his plate, punctuating the heavy silence that enveloped them. The distance between them felt insurmountable, and Patricia longed for the days when love and laughter were the foundation of their relationship, not the tension and unspoken frustrations that now filled the space between them. Silence enveloped the room as I cleared my throat, the sound resonating like a fragile echo in the stillness. "Keith, we can't go on like this," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, tinged with fear of shattering the delicate peace that had settled between us. "We need to talk about what happened. We can't let this silence become our new normal." Keith continued to eat, his expression unreadable, the tension palpable in the air. Finally, he set down his fork, a subtle but significant gesture indicating I had at least a moment of his attention. "What do you want me to say, Patricia?" he asked, weariness creeping into his tone. I felt my heart ache as I replied, "I want to understand why you're taking this so hard. Why does it feel like you're choosing them over me?" The hurt in my voice was unmistakable, a raw honesty that cut through the silence. He sighed, folding his hands in front of him, a gesture that spoke volumes about the weight of his dilemma. "They're my parents, Patricia. They've been hoping to go to Venice their whole lives. And what about us? What about our plans and dreams?" I pressed, frustration bubbling to the surface, my voice rising as desperation to bridge the widening chasm between us took hold. Keith ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture of exasperation that I had come to recognize all too well. I know," he said, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of the man I had married, a man torn and conflicted but not indifferent. "It's just, they've always been there for me. I feel obligated, but where does that leave us, Keith?" I leaned forward, desperate to catch his eye, to make him see the depth of my hurt. "What about our marriage?" The pause that followed felt like an eternity, a sinkhole of fear opening beneath me. Perhaps we weren't as solid as I had once believed. Perhaps our foundation was less rock and more sand, easily eroded by the steady tide of his parents' needs and desires. "It's supposed to be us against the world, Keith, not me against you and them," I said quietly, my voice steadier than the storm of emotions raging inside me. He looked at me, then really looked, and I could see the internal conflict warring within him. "I know, Patricia," he said finally. "I just don't know how to make everyone happy." "That's just it," I replied, clarity washing over me like a refreshing tide. "We can't always make everyone happy, but we made vows to each other. Doesn't that count for something?" He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the table before finding mine again. "It does. It counts for a lot." The rest of the meal passed in contemplative silence, a stark contrast to the strained quiet that had become our norm. It felt as though my words had either planted a seed or perhaps watered one that had been lying dormant within Keith all this time. The next morning, I awoke to a suffocating quiet that settled over the house like a heavy blanket. The other side of the bed remained untouched, a stark reminder of the emotional distance that had grown between us. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I reached for my phone, bracing for the usual lack of messages, a silent testament to the chasm that had formed. Instead, my screen was flooded with notifications, all from my bank. A lump formed in my throat as I read the details of the transactions, multiple charges, including airline tickets to Venice. As I sat there in the quiet of early morning, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Keith and his parents had embarked on a Venetian getaway that was supposed to be ours, financed by my hard-earned bonus. Disbelief washed over me, quickly morphing into anger and a profound sense of betrayal. The phone felt heavy in my hand, the truth settling like a stone in my stomach. Keith, the person I had trusted with everything, had violated that trust in the most hurtful way. With trembling hands, I dialed his number, knowing full well he wouldn't answer. Not with the time difference, and certainly not with the echoes of our last confrontation still hanging in the air. As the voicemail beep sounded, almost tauntingly cheerful, I spoke, my voice shaking but resolute. "Keith, I saw the charges. You took your parents to Venice using my bonus. I don't even know what to say, but I hope it's worth it. I hope it's worth everything." The call ended, leaving the house feeling colder and emptier than before. The walls seemed to close in around me, heavy with the weight of unspoken words, and now likely words that would never be spoken. I sat at the kitchen table enveloped by silence, while inside, a storm of emotions raged. With a resolute heart, I began canceling the hotel reservations, the return flights, and every aspect of the trip tied to my finances. With each cancellation, I felt a part of my former life slipping away, the future I had envisioned dissolving before my eyes. Once everything was undone, I made the definitive decision to sever financial ties. I contacted the bank and removed Keith's access to my accounts. Each click a mix of fear and liberation. The man I had married, the family I had tried to integrate into, were now strangers. Strangers who had exploited my generosity instead of cherishing it. With mechanical precision, I packed my bags, each item a reminder of a dream that needed to be shelved. There was no possibility of returning to what was. No apology could mend the breach his actions had caused. Keith had made his choice clear, and in doing so, he had determined my path as well. The wedding ring, once a symbol of our commitment, now felt cold and heavy in my palm. I left it on the counter, its sparkle mocking the morning light. With one final glance at the life I was leaving behind, I shut the door on what had never truly been a home. It was late afternoon by the time I drove away, my car filled with clothes and essentials, each item a stark reminder of how swiftly my life had turned. As I drove, my phone buzzed with messages, one from Keith, several from his mother. I pulled over to read them, knowing they would only strengthen my resolve. Keith's message was simple. "Patricia, please, we need to talk about this. Can't we just discuss it?" His words felt hollow, almost insulting in their simplicity. I started to type a reply but stopped. No words could bridge the gulf between us now. His mother's messages were a mix of confusion and attempts to justify their actions, but they too fell on deaf ears. The decision was made, and the chapter was closed. As I drove toward a new beginning, amidst the shock and hurt, I turned my phone off, leaving Keith's mother's desperate messages unanswered. They were halfway around the world, enjoying the sights of Venice on a trip funded by deceit. They could sort out their accommodations without me. My first move was to secure my finances. I drove to the bank where the manager, a compassionate middle-aged woman, greeted me warmly. "I need to ensure my husband can no longer access my accounts," I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded with understanding, assuring me, "Let's make sure you're fully protected." By the time I left the bank, I felt a renewed sense of control. My accounts were secure. With a resolute mind, I drove to the only place where I felt I could truly relax. My sister's house. She opened the door before I even knocked, pulling me into a comforting embrace. "Patricia, I've been so worried," she said, her concern palpable. As we sat at her kitchen table, she expressed disbelief at Keith's actions. "You deserve so much better," she asserted. I nodded, the reality of the situation sinking in. "I know. That's why I'm not going back. I've canceled everything and left the house. I'm done," I declared. Isabella squeezed my hand, a mix of anger and pride on her face. "Good for you. What's your plan now?" Glancing around the familiar surroundings, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "I'm starting with filing for divorce. I can't stay married to someone who has so little respect for me. Do you need a lawyer?" Isabella offered immediately, ready to support me in any way she could. "I'll find one," I affirmed, feeling my resolve harden. I need someone who doesn't know Keith or his family. I need this to be a clean cut. As Isabella and I unpacked my car and began planning the next few days, I found comfort in the mundane tasks, a grounding force amid the chaos. Standing in her kitchen with a mug of coffee warming my hands, my phone vibrated insistently. It was Keith again, his message a blend of apology and plea. "Patricia, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I miss you. And I think we can work things out." I sighed, his repeated apologies now feeling as insubstantial as a threadbare blanket. "Not this time, Keith," I muttered under my breath, crafting a response that left no room for doubt. "There's nothing left to discuss. Please respect my decision." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't enough to sway my resolve. This determination was put to the test a few days later, when Keith's parents showed up at my sister's doorstep, their faces contorted with anger. They barged past the stunned Isabella. "You've got some nerve, Patricia," his mother exclaimed shrilly. "You ruined our family vacation. You're just a greedy, selfish woman." Isabella stepped in front of me, her posture protective. "That's enough. You're not going to come into my house and insult my sister," she declared firmly. The argument escalated quickly, catching the attention of neighbors who began to peek out of their windows, drawn by the commotion. The confrontation was intense, but Isabella's unwavering support and my newfound clarity helped me stand firm. This was not just a moment of confrontation. It was a definitive end to a chapter of my life that I was ready to close. As the confrontation with Keith's parents escalated, I was certain it would end with the police being called. Isabella, with her protective stance, firmly told them to leave or she would call the authorities herself. Their departure did little to clear the air, leaving a palpable tension lingering in their wake. However, amidst the turmoil, a profound realization took hold. I was unequivocally done. The divorce process felt like navigating a sterile procedural dance. I methodically signed papers and nodded through legal explanations regarding settlements and asset divisions. Each signature seemed to sever another chain, each document signed loosening a tether that had bound me. When it was all finally over, I stepped out of the courthouse feeling liberated. The air was fresh, and a gentle breeze played with the loose strands of my hair. Isabella was there to meet me, her embrace tight and supportive. "You did it, Patricia," she whispered, pride resonating in her voice. Indeed, I had stood strong against the selfishness that tried to dominate me and against the manipulation that sought to keep me chained. As I walked away from the courthouse, I turned my back on a past that no longer had any hold on me. Keith's messages continued to arrive for a while, apologies, pleas, and eventually expressions of anger. But I left them unread, floating in the digital void as I moved on with my life. The apartment I rented was modest but filled with sunlight. I decorated it with plants, filled the shelves with books, and began making new memories. I enrolled in courses that reignited a passion for learning I had neglected for too long. One tranquil evening, as I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea in hand, I finally deleted Keith's number from my phone. It was a symbolic gesture, but one that felt deeply cathartic. I was truly free to heal, free to grow, and most importantly, free to be unapologetically myself. With each new day, I felt more empowered, embracing my newfound freedom and the endless possibilities that lay ahead.